I have an aging narcissistic mother, and I understand exactly why it is a difficult task to care for her. She is increasingly bitter, always angry, hypersensitive, and overly critical. That's why I make sure to do the following things to ensure that I don't have to endure her abuse. I can and do put a stop to it, and you can too. Let's examine just how narcissism affects a person's behavior, what that means for the children of a narcissist, how she will change as she gets older, and the strategies you can use to deal with her while still taking care of yourself. Number 1. Understanding the elderly narcissistic mother. The first step in the process is to know exactly what you're dealing with when you have a narcissistic mother. You have to educate yourself about every aspect of narcissism so that you can better deal with the changes that happen with age in a female narcissist. You've already begun that process, but don't stop here. Keep educating yourself and learning more about the nature of this devastating personality disorder. The more you know, the more you can understand how her abuse has affected you. You can then do what you need to do to take care of yourself while taking care of her. She will be increasingly toxic as she has to face her own mortality and increasing vulnerability. That means she will increase her efforts to control your behavior and that of other family members. To combat that kind of toxicity, you have to understand as much as you can about cluster B personality disorders and the nuances of narcissistic personality disorder, particularly with respect to how the mental condition affects women and mothers. Number 2, knowing your limits. As you gain more of an understanding of narcissism, one of the things you'll notice is that narcissists routinely violate everyone else's boundaries. When their own mental condition was forming, they had no boundaries, so they don't have an understanding of what that means. Whether from trauma or the unintentional abuse of overprotective parents, the budding narcissist was never allowed to do anything for themselves, or they were denied the luxury of setting their own limits. That's part of why they don't respect anyone else's boundaries. But boundaries aren't really about making other people respect you. They're about you respecting yourself. That's why it's very important to determine your boundaries. You do that by thinking about all the times in your life that you have felt that someone has crossed a line. What line did they cross? What did you feel you lost when they did that? For example, maybe your narcissistic mother read your diary and you felt you lost privacy or dignity. Perhaps she called you names and you felt you lost respect or self-esteem. Identify those times when you felt a boundary was crossed and what it was that you felt you lost or had damaged as a result of the experience. These are your limits. Once you've determined your limits, you can then begin the process of setting consequences for anyone who violates them ever again. Number 3, protecting your boundaries. The next step in the process is to actually set and protect those boundaries. This means confronting the people you believe violate your boundaries regularly, including your narcissistic mother, and letting them know the consequences of doing so in the future. For each boundary you identified, you need to determine a consequence. This might be something as minor as calling out the behavior, or something as major as leaving the person's presence, or even going no contact until they can behave more appropriately. When you present your boundaries and consequences to toxic people like your narcissistic mother, you'll want to ensure they won't later claim they didn't know anything about it. That's why it's often a good idea to give them a written copy of your boundaries. It might look something like the following. Number 4, plan your responses. Another tactic to use is to plan your responses to the kinds of things you know she might say. She uses her knowledge of your life against you, and it's fair game for you to do the same. You've lived with her abuse your entire life. You know what she's likely to say and do, so you can use that to your advantage. plan out what you will say if she tries to trigger you or does something that you don't like. If you plan it out, you can deliver the remark in a calm way that doesn't betray any emotional reaction. You should also be prepared, though, for her response to what you say. She might respond in a way you don't expect. While you can't exactly plan what to say to her response, you can plan to stay calm. It's critical because if you become emotional, she'll know she's getting to you. And that's not something you want to let her know. Number 5, employ positive reinforcement. This sounds like you're training a dog instead of a narcissistic mother, but the idea is similar. If you reward her good behavior with positive reinforcement, she will be good more often. It's a simple but effective behavioral modification technique. That sounds very manipulative, but the reality is that you won't change your mother's behavior any other way than by using such tactics. You're not fixing her, but you are changing how she behaves with you. It won't change anything about how she feels inside, and it won't change how she acts toward other people. Only long-term intense therapy can do that, but it will change how she behaves toward you. That's the goal. And to do that effectively, sometimes you have to use tactics that push her to modify how she behaves. Positive reinforcement is a technique that people use all the time with their children. If your child behaves well, you praise him or her. You might even give them some kind of reward. That's positive reinforcement. It works with your children, and it will work with your elderly narcissistic mother as well. It will take some time, but in the end, you'll notice a difference in her behavior. Number 6, work with professional therapists. Working with a professional therapist can help you take your healing to a whole new level. It's important because you will experience myriad emotions as you're caring for your toxic mother. You'll be dealing with her aging issues as well as her narcissism. One of those things is a lot for anyone, but the combination can cause big problems for you mentally and physically. A therapist can help you sort through the emotions and challenges that will come up throughout this process. They can provide an objective viewpoint, and of course, they have expertise in how to help you process your feelings, past trauma, and the challenging situations that lie ahead. You can do a lot of personal growth work on your own, but a therapist can help you move beyond any blocks you're experiencing. They can also help you work through your issues faster than you might be able to do on your own. There is very little social stigma anymore around seeking help from a therapist, and I can tell you that it takes a lot of courage to do this kind of work. It is perhaps the bravest thing you'll ever do in your life, and that's really the point. It's for your benefit, so don't worry about what anyone else thinks. Help yourself because you deserve it. You'll be so happy you did in the end. Number 7, no contact is always possible. Another thing you have to leave on the table is the possibility of going no contact. You might not want to do this, but if your elderly narcissistic mother becomes too abusive, you must keep it as a possibility. If she requires a caretaker, you can always arrange for someone to work with her before you cut all ties. You can also turn to your siblings to help if you need some time away from her. No contact doesn't have to mean forever, but when you decide to do it, it needs to be complete. Don't take any phone calls from her, don't respond to any of her attempts to contact you, and block her from any other way of contacting you, such as social media. Give yourself the complete break you might need to work through her abusive treatment. If there comes a time when you think you will want to contact her again, you can do that when you're ready. But it's okay to stop being in contact with someone who is toxic. That always has to be an option, and you should make sure your mother understands it's a possibility if she continues her abusive behavior. In the end, a narcissistic mother is a nightmare parent for any child, and she only gets worse as she ages. You might end up having to deal with her in her old age. Aging is particularly hard for a narcissistic woman who is accustomed to being able to use her looks to manipulate people. As you try to deal with her, you'll find she will turn up the heat on her manipulation tactics. One important one is that she will use the very emotional wounds she created against you. But you don't have to allow her to do that. I have created a 5-step roadmap to heal emotional triggers to help you identify, diffuse, and heal the emotional wounds and triggers she created with her abusive treatment. It's a free guide, and if you would like a copy, just click on the link below the video. I'll send it directly to your inbox, and you can get started on your healing journey today. Thanks for watching.